Welcome to our introduction to the topic of religion. As always, as good historians, we need to define our terms. So what do we mean by religion? Cole and Ortega give us three definitions of religion, and these are really interesting because they come from three different people who approach society from different points of view. So the first is Emile Durkheim. He was a sociologist. His definition of religion is this: that religion is a unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. That is to say, things set apart and forbidden. Beliefs and practices which unite into one single moral community called a church and all those who adhere to them. So the interesting thing about this is that you have, let me see if I can do this, beliefs and practices. A unified system of beliefs and practices relative to sacred things that unite into one single moral community, all those who adhere to them. All right, don't get too hung up on the fact that he's calling it a church. He's a European sociologist from the 19th century. He does not mean Christianity here. Any unified system of beliefs and practices that unite the people who follow that system of beliefs and practices into one single moral community. And these are beliefs and practices relative to sacred things. What is he not including here? God. There is no mention of a deity in Durkheim's definition because he's a sociologist. So he's looking at how religion functions in society. All right, well, let's move on to Paul Tillich, who was a late 19th, early 20th century theologian, Protestant theologian. His definition of religion is the state of being grasped by an ultimate concern, which qualifies all other concerns as preliminary and which itself contains the answer to the questions of the meaning of our lives. So you're being grasped by an ultimate concern, which contains the answer to the question of the meaning of our lives. Grasped is a really interesting word here because he's really going after the intensity of religious emotion here, of religious feeling. But again, no God. He does not mention a deity. Finally, we get to Sigmund Freud, good old Siggy. Now, Sigmund Freud, the father of psychoanalysis, states that gods are an expression of our needs. Well, this is Cole and Ortega, not Freud himself. Gods are an expression of our need for answers to troubling questions central to the human condition. While fathers may have provided these answers for children, adults created a being or beings as a substitute for the authority of the father. So here finally we have mention of a god, and yet we see this in the definition by Sigmund Freud, who's saying basically human beings made it up because we need to have answers for troubling questions that are central to the human condition. While fathers answered these questions for children, we don't have that luxury when we're adults. So according to Freud, human beings created a being or beings as a substitute for the authority of the father. So here, of course, his viewpoint is very patriarchal, a bit misogynistic. But so we see these three different definitions for religion. So what that should tell you is that we're not really sure that we we see what religion does. We see what people who adhere to different religions claim to believe. But as far as having one single definition of religion, that still eludes us so far. For the purpose of this class, though, I think I'm going to go ahead and go with Durkheim, because his religion, or his definition, really looks at how religion functions in a society. Oh, no, I'm supposed to be doing highlighting. Uh-oh, hold on. Yes, here we go. All of it, all of it, all of it. There we go. Durkheim. So what we are going to look at is how a religion functions in a society. All right, moving on. Okay, so now we're going to look at some of the primary sources that I've assigned you this week. We're going to look at each of these in more detail later, but for right now, I just want you to kind of think about these in connection to each other. So number one, look at the Enuma Elish and the first two chapters of Genesis. What elements do these texts have in common when discussing the creation of the universe or the world and the creation of human beings? So those are two separate things. Number two, look at the negative confessions and the reading from the book of Exodus. Basically, this is the 10 Commandments. In last week's discussion, some of you already made the connection between the negative confessions and the 10 Commandments. Kudos to you. So just take a look at these two and kind of see what they have in common. Finally, look at the excerpt from the Gospel of Matthew, the Sermon on the Mount, and the excerpt from the Quran. What do these texts have in common? What ethical aspects are they putting forward? Moving on.